it is pretty much time to get started. I hope that everybody got their printouts. We sent it just a little while ago, and if not, it is in the mail to you, and you will have a copy of the PowerPoint. If any of you were on the call last Friday for the Science of Reading, what I should have learned in college, and there was that snafu in timing, I apologize again. And we should get going with looking at some things with spelling. So I'm going to share my screen, if I can get down here, and show you some stuff about spelling in this hour. So one of the things that is really true is I like to ask people to participate, even when we're doing this 1 hour. So I will be asking you, to do things with me and to ask questions and to be part of the process actively. So one of the things that is really clear to me is that a lot of time teachers will learn the science of reading, and they'll do a whole lot of work in teaching their students reading, but somehow spelling becomes the ignored stepsister. And one of the groups, Cook, Slee, and Young, in 2008, questioned teachers about how much of their reading instructional time was spent on spelling, and it was less than 4%. I think that's pretty graphic. The other things that are really important is that Snow, Burns, and Griffin, and we've known this for a long time, the letters and their sounds, the spelling patterns or orthography, and the morphemes, prefixes, suffixes, roots, base need to be taught and integrated both for reading and spelling. The other thing is English spelling is complex, but it is not unlearnable. Actually, there's some really strong principles that we can teach our students to think about. One of them is, and this is the work of Hannah et al., where they took 18,000 words from textbooks from K through college, and they asked the computer to sort. And what they found is that there's very specific principles, and it's for spelling and reading. One is, where is the sound in the word? I call that the position principle. Is it at the beginning, middle, or end of the word? And then also, and these are Joshi Malt Joshi talks about neighboring letters. And so when you have different letters, they have a relationship to each other. So I call that the position principle. And then if you have a single vowel, all kinds of spelling rules kind of relate to that vowel and how you spell the sounds after it. So yes, we have all of these different 26 letters, 44 phonemes, 250 different spelling patterns, but we start to group and they become understandable and teachable and problem solvable. Another thing that's really interesting to me, and I love big words, this is something that you're going to learn about me, is that our language is a morphophonemic language. What that means is that meaning gets involved with spelling. One way to see this is in the word sign, signature. In the word sign, we don't hear a G at all, do we? But when we look at another word that is in the same morpheme family, signature, then that G is pronounced. And there's many words that way. So we want to be talking about what language does this word originate from, where is it in the word, what are the relationships of the sounds, and then spelling becomes absolutely understandable. So One of the things that Lenita Airy said, and I say it all the time, is that spelling and reading are two sides of the same coin. And that's really important. Let's look at how we have to spell a word. And spelling is more challenging than reading because of recall and working memory. What I mean by working memory is that as you're trying to hear a word, taking a spelling test, you have to keep a lot of stuff on your mental plate to be able to make it, to think through all the steps. And that's not true when you're reading a word because the letters and the sequence and all the spelling patterns are in front of your eyes. So, when you spell something, you have to hear it accurately. You have to say the word accurately because if you cannot say a word accurately, you can't spell it. If the word is a whole word, you have to segment it. That's the phonemic awareness skill that's important for spelling. You have to keep the sounds in the correct order. That's working memory. You have to map the letters onto the sounds. In other words, translate the sounds into their letter representations. You have to then consider, are there any patterns or syllable types or morphemes that are part of this word, and then you have to write it down. If we look at reading, it's a little bit different. You see the word and you translate the letters into the sounds. You still have to keep the sounds in the correct order and sequence. You still have to use your working memory. You'll see the orthographic patterns instead of having to recall them, as well as the syllable types and the morphemes. And then you have to blend those sounds into a word. So the process is really similar, and yet it's different. You have to pull everything from your head in spelling, and you can see it in front of your eyes in reading. So if we teach spelling and reading in tandem simultaneously, what happens is the act of learning both of those creates a sturdier and more accessible image of that word. One of the things that I really love, and I'm sure you guys have seen Stanislaus Dehaene's presentations and books that talk about this circuit in the brain, on the left side of the brain, for reading and spelling. And what happens is a word comes in the blue area, because we see the letters, and then it goes to an area that Stanislaus Dehaene calls the visual word form area. And what that area does is it literally looks at every letter and the patterns. It pays attention to every letter and it says, oh, this is the word. And then it sends that information out to the different areas to is the meaning of the word, how do we articulate it, how do we pronounce it, and that's the circuit that we have in our brain. His work is so interesting to me because it's like pulling everything together. The other part of spelling that I think is really important is we want to be able to understand where our students' skills are. These are some of the tests that I use, and I wonder if you guys use other tests than this. My go-to test is the Wechsler Achievement Test. And the reason I like that test so much is it asks students to read real words and nonsense words. It has a spelling section, and it also has a fluency section. The newest one, which I have not cracked my manual yet for, has even more information for us as teachers. I'm wondering what different people who are here today use as their spelling test when they get students and begin to make plans. Julie Busgang, are you willing to share what you use for your evaluations?
Sure. I do a combination of things, but I do use the words their way ones. And I also, depending on the student that I'm working with, will sometimes use the spelling assessment from the DAR. And
Okay.
sometimes I use ones from Susan Barton.
Okay. So we have lots of different assessments. I think one of the things that's really nice is Words Their Way is accessible and free online. And to me, I think this is my criteria, and see if you guys agree with this. One, I want it to be a range of words from a couple of sounds to simple one syllable, complex one syllable, and multi-syllable words. I want them to be decodable, where all the letters say the sounds you expect. I want some rule-bound words, and I want some high-frequency words that have one or two letters that are wonky, that don't follow the rules. Because then I can look at my students, and I'm not actually very interested in which words they get correctly, although that tells me what they know. But I also want to see what their mistakes are. And that's really important to me. Saying, oh, what kind of mistake is this? Is it a phonemic awareness? Is it a letter and a sound? Is it a spelling pattern? Is it a prefix, a suffix, a base word? And then I can get a sense of where my students are holding and where I have to begin. I also do a thing where I just have a list of all the consonants, the single consonants, the digraphs, even blends and vowels. And I do a spelling test in which I dictate those sounds and ask my whole class to write them down. And that really is illuminating because, again, we have to really think about what have our students memorized and what happens when they have to give us a sound and the letter that corresponds with it, but not in something they've memorized. So that's really, really helpful. Anybody else? Like Karen, do you have something else that you use?
We don't test spelling in the district that I'm in.
Oh, how wise of them. And so you're being the rebel and you're going and saying, no, no, we've got to do this, right?
Yes,
Good on
because
you.
I'm now teaching kindergarten. I was teaching second grade, and when I get second graders who can't identify sounds or letters or can't spell anything, then it's time to, we need to start from ground.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So stay with your convictions and look at my website to get any help that you can get. Okay. Okay. So another thing that I saw that was really interesting to me was this sequence of skills. And this was done in 2004 by Bear, Invernizzi, and Templeton and Johnston. And what it says is, what are these kids writing like? So this is good for you, Karen. Are these kids that you have in kindergarten just kind of scribbling? That's what they're writing? Or do they know their beginning consonants, which is late emergent? Or do they know their ending consonants? Because that's the sequence of our students being able to perceive the sounds. They first can hear and do phonemic awareness activities with the initial sound, and then the final sound, and then the medial sound, the vowel. Do they know the vowel, the single vowels, the short vowels? Do they know the consonant digraphs and blends? So we want to ask all of these different questions of, what are they getting accurate? Because again, that tells us where do we begin. So the spelling that I have been working with for years now, I think is somewhat of a paradigm shift. And what I mean by that is I'm asking students of all ages from kindergarten on to be thinking instead of memorizing. So I'm going to get that to happen by how I speak with them, by asking questions by setting up a list of words that focus on one idea, not all of the different spellings of a certain sound. I begin with one, and then I add another, and then another. So, thinking versus memorizing, I'm always saying, what can I ask a question about, and what do I have to tell them? And then instead of saying, oh, I'm going to work with this idea for a week, and the next week I'm going to do a new one, and the next week I'm going to do another one, I want to say, have my students mastered this? And so I can go ahead. Because I want my students to be linguistic explorers instead of Friday spellers. Because we have a lot of smart kids who can memorize for Friday spelling, but then mysteriously when we do a cumulative testing, they don't know the words anymore. So we want it to be more solid than that. And again, this type of spelling is really based on the research of Hannah Hodges, and Rudolph. And I spoke about them earlier, where they found out that the English language is 96% reliable. And most people say, oh my gosh, English is crazy. It's just not, it's not logical. Nay, nay. The linguists tell us, if you know the letters and the sounds, which is what, Karen, you're saying you got to teach to your kids, right? And it's not only the letters and the sounds, but how they articulate the sounds, and we're going to experience that with one letter. It's the location in the word, beginning, middle, or end. So if I have the sound ah, that can be spelled with AU or AW, in the beginning or middle of a word or syllable, I spell it with AU. At the end of a syllable or end of a word, I spell it with AW. That's that location within the word. And then for words origin, if I have the letter CH, well, in Anglo-Saxon words, it says ch. In French words, it says sh. And in Greek and Latin words, it says k. So I don't need to know where this word came from, where it originated from. This is just more of Hannah's work. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you is there is a new research study that was done by Edward Fry of the Fry List, where he takes Hannah's study, which was about 1,000 pages, and he's condensed it into about 9. We'll see some of his work in a reference for him, and that makes life a whole lot easier because it's really easy to see, oh, what are the relative frequencies of the different spelling patterns, and that tells us what to teach first, second, and third. Okay. So these are, just reiterating again, what it's based on. Position in the word, possible and probable spelling patterns, what I call the protection principle, which is when I have a one-letter weak vowel, there's different spellings that come after it. So one-letter weak vowel can be changed by either vowels or consonants, like vowel plus E, single vowel plus R. And when we have words like the word bake versus back, we have that k sound at the end of a word, and its spelling of k is based on the vowel that comes before it. If it's a one-letter vowel, we spell it with CK. If it's a two-letter vowel, we spell that k at the end with a K. So that's protection. We're going to see some of this, okay, guys? So we want our students to know that there are repeating patterns. English makes sense. They can think about it, and they can discover the principles if we ask them enough questions. So when I teach a spelling rule, I look to say, what are the linguistic principles? How can I introduce and talk to my kids to entice them into looking for patterns? What questions will I ask them? I'm only going to choose words that follow the rule, and then I want them to spell words with that pattern, read, do phonemic awareness, fluency, and spelling. And I have my students create their own word study guidebooks. So when we learn a certain pattern, they write it down and have it as a resource for themselves. So I'm going to be teaching a phonology pattern with the letter S, and I'm wondering if someone is willing to work with me on this and to demonstrate it. And I'll tell you, I ask for volunteers if they don't come on. I should be mean and say, Amy Sato, are you there? She isn't.
I'll do it.
Okay, Julie. Okay, Julie. So I'm going to show you a picture of some mouths, and we're going to learn the letter S. The letter S says S. Can you say that sound for me? S. Now, I want to be sure before we do this, every consonant that we learn, we either use our voice box with or we don't. So I want you to feel that. Can you say sh, zh, and feel your throat? Sh, zh. Can you feel a difference there?
Yeah, the second one is voiced.
Okay, and what it is kind of like your vocal folds are flapping and they're wiggling, okay? So we're going to talk about S and see if it is using our vocal folds moving and being voiced or not. So when you say the sound S, are you using your lips or your tongue? S.
I'm using my tongue and my teeth.
Let's talk about that. How is your tongue working with your teeth?
My tongue is coming up to block the air and make it sort of hiss through my teeth.
I agree with you. That is absolutely what your tongue is doing. What about your lips? Are they pulled back in a smile or pushed forward into a kind of puckered feeling?
They're pulled back slightly and they're open.
I agree. I agree. And is it voiced or unvoiced?
It's unvoiced.
So I want you guys to know that Julie knows her stuff, because she is not only aware of how the lips are forming this sound, but she's really also paying attention to her tongue and her teeth. Thank you, Julie, for doing that. Okay, let's talk about the air for this letter S. Is it coming in a stream or is it in a puff?
It's coming in a stream.
Okay, and one of the things that I would not let my kids do is tell me that without feeling it, okay? I want them to feel it. Now, Julie, is it coming in a narrow stream or is it a wide stream like sh, s, s?
I think it's a narrow stream.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And we already talked about whether it was voiced or unvoiced, right? And what I'm going to tell everybody else is that many consonants, not all of them, but many consonants come in pairs, and we use the same part of our mouth, and we do the same action, and the air is the same, and one is voiced and one is unvoiced. And for S, the letter that is its partner is Z. So can everybody kind of say that and feel if their mouth feels the same? Go S, Z. If your lips, your tongue position is the same. S, Z. Is that true, May? S, Z.
Yeah, first, your lips are a little pulled back.
Okay, and for Z also?
Not really.
Okay, can you say the sound of Z, please?
Zzz,
Are your lips pulled back in a smile for that?
a little.
Yes. Can you say the sound of S? I have to tell you, I get to look at your mouth, and if I were there with you, I'd show you a mirror, and your mouth, your lips are exactly the same pulled back. Okay? Using mirrors is really helpful. Now, I want to thank May for doing that with me, because one of the things that demonstrated, and actually with Julie also, I asked the question, what part of your mouth are you using, Julie, your lips or your tongue? And I was expecting lips, because the lips are easier to feel than the tongue. But what I did is I didn't say, no, you're wrong. I said, what are you thinking? And then we went in that direction. So one of the things that I think is really important in the approach that I use in teaching teachers is not only what do I need to teach, but how do I teach it? And thirdly, what happens if what's going on in my mind doesn't match what's going on in my student's mind? How do we then negotiate that together in a way that teaches those students to self-correct? So that is something that I just got to be able to demonstrate with you guys. Thank you. So that was an example of orthography, which is of phonology, which is part of spelling and reading. We have to have our students know the letters and the sounds that map onto them. We're going to take the same letter, S, and now we're going to look at it through the lens of spelling patterns or orthography. So here's where we go with that. Next. One of the things that is true is if you hear the sound of S, there's a number of different ways to spell it. You can just have an S at the beginning of a word. You can also have an S at the end of a word with some words for plural. C can sometimes say S if it's followed by certain vowels, I, E, and Y. You can also have two S's at the end of a word, a single syllable word, when there is a single vowel in front of it, immediately followed by the S. We can have a SE because we can't just stick an S on a word unless it means it's plural at the end. And if you happen to have a Greek origin word, then you spell S with PS. So would I put all of those in a spelling lesson? Absolutely, positively not. I would go with one, stabilize it, and then go to another one, and then another one. Well, how do I decide to do that? So here is this information that is from a study. It's called Phonics, a Large Phoneme Graphing Frequency Count Revised. I'm gonna copy this and put it onto the slide. I think I can do this. So you have that reference. Yes, there it is, guys. Okay, so the name of the study is a Large Phoneme Graphing Frequency Count Revised. Phonics, a Large Phoneme Graphing Frequency Count Revised by Edward Fry, 2004. It's really a lovely study. It really helps us a lot. So in that study, if I look at what are the possible ways and the probable ways of spelling S, in Hannah et al.'s 17,000 words, 5,219 of those words were spelled with just a single S. Well, that's pretty good, isn't it? That's a real reliable pattern. The letter C said the sound of S 1,067 times, SS 442, and SE 186. So what that tells me is I'm going to start by teaching the S as a single consonant. And once my students really have that, I'm going to teach the C rule. And once they have that, I'm going to go into the floss rule, which is the SS pattern. And then finally, after quite a while, I'm going to teach some of those words that have SE at the end. That's how I use Fry's study. It's really, really helpful. Okay, so here is an example of the C rule. How many people already know this? Is this a valuable thing for me to go through and demonstrate with somebody? How many want me to teach this with someone? You have to raise your hands so I can see. 1, 2. Julie, you know this already? Okay. Karen, do you know this already? Okay. And I don't know the other people because I can't see their faces. So I'm going to do this anyway, Julie. I'm sorry if I'm boring you. May, can you do this with me? Can you be my demonstrator, please? Okay. So I'm going to introduce the rule and I'm going to say to you, the consonant letter C is really interesting because it can have two different sounds. What I want to do with you is I want to discover the two sounds that C can make. And how can I figure out, think about when it says one thing versus the other. Okay? So that's what we're going for. So let's look at this word cat. Can you say that word for me, please?
Cat.
I agree. What did the C sound like at the beginning of the word cat? Can you say the sound? And what other letter do you know that makes that sound?
Letter C and letter K.
Exactly. So the C is sounding like a K, isn't it? Let's see the next word, cut. How is the C sounding there? Is it, what is it sounding like? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, it's K.
Okay, so both in the word cat and in the word cut, the C is sounding like K. In spelling, there is a really important principle. It's called the position principle. What that says is the letter that comes after the C influences it. So when an A came after the C in cat, what did it say? And in the word came, where we have another word with the CA, did it also say the K sound?
Yes.
And in the word scamp, where there's an A right after the C at the end of that line, did the C also say K?
Yes.
So would you agree with me that when a C is followed by an A, it says K?
Yes.
Okay. And when there's an U after it, does it also say K, like in cut?
Yes, it sounds the same.
Okay. And what about when there's an O? Does it sound the same or not? Cot.
It sounds the same.
Okay, so we have three letters that urge the C to say K, A, U, and O. Let's look at the next line where the C has a consonant after it and see what the sound of the letter is. In the word cloud, what is the sound of the C?
It's still K.
Okay, so when C has an L after it, would you agree that it says K? Like
Yes.
clap and club. What if there's an R after the C? What does the C say? Like crib and script.
It's still K.
Oh, okay. So if a consonant or A or U or O come after the C, it says K. Let's look at the last line. The first word there is the word mice. What is the C sounding at the end of the word mice?
It sounds S.
Ah, and what letter is coming after it?
Letter E.
Oh, how about in the word scent, like the smell, SCENT? Is the C still saying S when there's an E after it?
Yes.
How about in the word pace? Is the C saying S with an E after it?
Yes, it's still S.
Okay. What about in the word cyst, which is CYST? How is the C at the beginning of the word cyst sounding? Like a K or an S?
An S.
Okay, and I realize I don't have a word on here that I should have. I should have something like the word city, shouldn't I? Because when C is followed by an I, E, or Y, what does it sound, May? And if it's followed by anything else, what does it sound like?
It's
Exactly. And this is a 100%er rule. This happens every time you see a C. Okay, so what you just saw was how I approach teaching the rules. I want my experiment or my word list to really frame how I ask my questions. I want to ask my students questions, and I want to say, do you see a pattern? And I think that that is better for my students, that they will remember and understand it more because they have created the pattern along with me, rather than me saying to them, you know, the letter C has two sounds, k and s. If it has an I or Y after it, it's S. Anything else, it's K. Because I can say that till the cows come home. My kids can't understand it unless they've had an experience with it. Thank you, May, for doing that with me. Any questions or comments about that procedure that you just watched? Nothing? Okay, so one of the things that you should know is on the website and also in my book, all of the things that I was saying to May are written down in agonizing detail so that you know exactly the questions to ask and the answers to expect. Because the whole idea that I'm trying to share with people is, how can you translate the research from the science of reading into a classroom experience? Because we all love the research, don't we? We all believe in this research, but we've got to say, how do I translate it? Okay, so we've looked at S from an phonology, which is letters and sounds. We've looked at it from orthographic patterns or spelling patterns. Now I want to look at the same letter and look at its meaning in words. Okay, it's morphology. Now, May, I probably wouldn't be doing this until the first grade with my students. And Karen, I'd probably be working for a long time with a lot of different patterns on the phonology and orthography, but I have to get to plurals because truthfully, in kindergarten we have plurals, don't we, in our books? And we have it for sure in first grade. So sometimes I teach each of these big concept groups in order, but when we deliver it with our students, we have to integrate it. We have to teach them a pattern, we have to have them reading, we have to have them spelling, we have to talk about meaning and vocabulary, we want them writing it in sentences, we want them writing it in reading it in connected text, and we want to do fluency work with them from day one. It's all of those different elements. So I'm going to ask for another volunteer. And I think, Abra, you're the one, or Karen. And I want to talk about the morpheme S. So which of you is willing to do that with me? Karen or Abra?
I don't mind. I just have a little bit of neighborhood noise in the background.
Okay. Okay, we'll try it and see if it works, okay? Or Karen, are you willing to do this with me? Okay.
I'll do it with you.
Okay. You're off the hook for a little while, Abra, but not very long. Okay. So, my first question is, what do you already know about plurals, Karen? And you can be your authentic self. You know, you
I'm
don't.
just, yeah, I mean, they end in S, they end in ES, it's more than one.
Okay, absolutely. So those are the possibilities. And what I want to do is I want to say, when do we use the S? When do we use the ES? And what are the sounds of them? Okay? So we're going to explore it in a little bit more depth. But I absolutely want to know if my students, what they know, what they confuse, and what they don't know. Karen knows a lot about this already. But I would ask her, you know, what does it mean more than one? And can you give me an example? Because sometimes students have those pat phrases, right? But they don't know what they mean. So I'm from, I wasn't born in Missouri, but I lived there for 9 years when I was a kid. So I say, show me what you're thinking about. Explain this to me. So we're going to start with just the letter S, Karen. And we're going to stick it on all of these words that we have in this lesson. And what we want to say is, what's the sound of the S in these different words? I'm going to read them to you. If I there's one boy or two boys, I put the S on there, but what is the sound at the very end of the word boys? Not the letter. I'm sorry, what?
It's the Z.
It's the Z. Oh, that's interesting. Is that voiced or unvoiced? Z.
It's voiced.
Okay. Now we're going to go top. Tops. How is the S on the end of tops sounding? Tops.
Has a
Yes, it is. And is that voiced or unvoiced? S.
unvoiced.
I agree. And how about the word tracks? How is the S at the end of that sounding? Tracks. Is it voiced or unvoiced?
Unvoiced.
And how about at the end of bags? Is it voiced or unvoiced?
Voiced.
I agree. So this S, it's just the letter S. What are the two sounds that we've heard with these words so far?
And Z.
I agree. Now, we know that the English language is logical. So there has to be a reason and a relationship between the sounds at the end of the base word and the sound of that plural S. So let's look at the word boy. What's the last sound in the word boy?
Yo.
Actually, do we say b-oya or is it
Oh,
b-oy?
boy.
Oy! Okay. Can you tell me if it's voiced or unvoiced? Oy. Oy.
It's voiced.
Oh, and how did the S, the plural S sound? Boys. Was it voiced or unvoiced?
Voiced.
Ah, voiced, voiced. What about the word top? What's the last sound in the word top? And is it voiced or unvoiced?
Unvoiced.
Oh, and when we say tops, is the S voiced or unvoiced?
Unvoiced.
Okay, and we could go through all the rest, but I have a question. Do you see a pattern yet?
Mm-hmm.
What's the pattern you see?
So if the final sound is voiced, the S will be voiced. And if it's unvoiced at the final sound, then it will be an unvoiced S.
You got the pattern. So if the final sound in the base word is unvoiced, the plural S is unvoiced. If the final sound in the base word is voiced, then the S sounds like the plural Z. Cool. It's logical, isn't it? Okay. Now, so you can see that I have it all written out, okay? But I didn't do it that way with you. But now, I would like to talk with Abra a little bit about another aspect of this. Abra, are you willing to do this with me, even though it's a little noisy?
Yes, I was actually closing some windows, but
Okay.
I'll turn my video back on in a few seconds.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. We have some words on this page: box, brush, badge, bus, and church. And we're going to say we learned about this voiced, unvoiced with other words, and we're going to just see if it fits or not. So in the word box, what's the last sound in the word box? Not letter, sound, box.
The last sound is X.
That is the last two sounds. You're absolutely right. X, because X says X, right? And the very last sound would be S. Would you agree with that?
For box.
Yes. What's the very last sound in box? It's S.
Oh.
There is the K before it, but I'm asking just for the very last sound. Now, if the very last sound is S, is that voiced or unvoiced? S.
That's unvoiced.
I agree. Based on what we did with Karen, if we stuck an S on it, then that S should be unvoiced. If I just put an S on the end of box, would you hear it?
No.
No. So I wouldn't be able to know that it means more than one box, would I? So
No.
what we're going to do is we're going to put an ES, not an S on it, and that E is going to sound like I. So it's boxes. Can you now hear that it's plural when I put that is on there? Boxes.
Yes.
Okay, and how many syllables do I now have in boxes? One or two?
2.
I agree. Now let's look at the word brush. What's the last sound in the word brush?
The last sound is sh,
I agree. Voiced or unvoiced?
unvoiced.
I agree. So if we go with our pattern that we figured out for plurals, I should put an S sound on it, right? It should be S, unvoiced, right? Unvoiced, unvoiced, right?
According to the last pattern, yes.
Yes, this thing where we
Right.
were looking, right? According to that. So if I have the word brush and I just stick an S sound on it, would you can you pronounce that?
You want me to pronounce it?
Yeah, say brush with an S on the end after the SH. Can you hear the plural at all?
No.
So we're going to put an ES onto it instead of just an S. And then we hear brushes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of explain this. I'm not going to torture you through the whole lesson, Abra. But what happens is there's a group of consonants and they're called sibilants, continuals. And the way we form them in our mouth has a lot of air coming out in streams of air. So it's S and Z and SH and ZH and GE and C and CH. All of those are called sibilants. And what happens is, in order to hear the plural with those letters, we add the ES because we need to hear the plural. That's the way that I approach the plurals. So Julie, is that the way you do it too? I can't hear you yet.
Yes.
Good. Okay. Good. Good. So if we look, this is a wonderful chart that talks about how we use our mouth to make the sounds. And if you look on where it says continual sibilance fricative, you can say S and Z is there, SH and ZH. And then we also have the CH and J and then the X, because the X has the sound of KS. Okay, so that's the ones that we put the plural ES with. Any questions or comments about that, guys? Okay, so I'm going to show you another idea of this position principle in spelling, which is that where a vowel occurs in the word, the beginning, middle, or end of the word or syllable, the spelling changes. So if I have aw, as in autumn, or taunt, or gnaw, I can use AU or AW depending on where the sound is. If I have the two vowel friends AI, in the beginning or middle, I use AI. At the end, I use AY. Same with EA and EY and Y. Same with OI and OY, OU and OW, OA and OW. So if I teach my students doing lessons where they discover, oh, at the beginning, middle, or end of a word, I spell something differently, look at how many words and how many spelling rules and patterns then cohere, are logical. I think it's pretty awesome. The other thing that we talked about before is what's the language of origin of different consonants and spelling patterns. And we talked about the CH being Anglo-Saxon and saying ch, the Latin saying k, the Greek ch says k, and the French says sh. Probably one of the most exciting and wonderful areas of spelling is to say, oh, where does this word come from? And I'm sure that some of you already know about etymonline, etymonline.org, where you can look up the origins of words. And I'm constantly interested in this because it explains so many of our spelling patterns. So I'm going to stop here. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Are there any questions, guys, after I, talked nonstop to you for an hour? Any? Okay. So what I would invite you to consider is to go further in depth with this. I'm going to be starting next week an overtime course. You've had like an hors d'oeuvre of what it's like in the class. We look at the letters and their sounds and the articulation. We look at the spelling patterns. We look at the morphemes, and we look at the etymology. And I know that a number of you came to this because you saw it posted on Facebook, and from the Science of Reading, What I Didn't Learn in College. And what we have done along with that group is to offer some scholarships. So if any of you, and I'm kind of taking Sarah's thunder here, see if I say it right, Sarah. Sarah's my buddy who helps me with all things technical, and if you correspond, you'll be corresponding mostly with Sarah, not me. But one of the things that we've said is if you are interested in taking that course, because you are on this, you're eligible for a significant discount. The course itself costs $450, and I'm putting the book in, and Science of Reading and another friend of mine is are giving some scholarships. So instead of the course costing $450, if you sign up and pay today, and you can do that in the chat, Sarah will get back to you, it costs $275, not $450. So that is the thank you for being here and helping your students that we'd like to do.